Hello dear viewer, welcome to another time where we take a cursory look at issues as it affects us as citizens and of course the nation at large. I am Obi Chukwemeka Oti. Following the initial stance of the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC to go on with its timetable as earlier planned, some political parties have gone on to conduct their primaries for State House of Assembly, House of Representatives, and senatorial positions, and indeed presidential primary, especially that of the main opposition party, People's Democratic Party. However, while still in the process, the electoral umpire decided to bow to the pressure from political parties by extending primary election deadline by 6 days. Though President Muhammadu Buhari is yet to assent the amended Electoral Act passed by the National Assembly to allow statutory delegates vote during the primaries, a coalition of election monitors and observers has warned the President against assenting to the recent Electoral Act 2022 Amendment Bill because preparations for the 2023 general elections are already in full gear. The coalition, made up of 24 election monitoring groups, gave this warning, adding that signing the bill now will cause disruption in the processes of primaries already commenced by many political parties under the provisions of the extant law. Today, on the big issue, we will be looking at party primaries, the Electoral Amendment Bill, and other ancillary matters. To lead the discussion today is a legal practitioner, human rights and democratic advocate, Dr. TUNJI ABAYOMI. Thank you for leading the discussion today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Great, sir. All right, let's start off with the recent move of INEC finally bowing to pressure from political parties after refusing to be arm-twisted twice into extending its June 3rd deadline for the conduct of political parties' primary elections. On Friday, May 27, we received the news of the extension, though the Commission was emphatic that this request could not be granted initially because it would disrupt other scheduled activities on the timetable, but it seems they could spare 6 days after all. As a lawyer, what's the import of this, especially because other political parties, particularly the main opposition, had to continue with their primaries working with the former schedule?
Well, I mean, seriously, whether the time was extended or not extended, in my view, is not particularly material. Events can be conducted within any time, whether on extended time or extended time. As it is clear now, the main opposition party already conducted its primary for presidential election. So the issue of extension is not particularly material to PDP.
Okay.
Now, the issue of extension is obviously not material to PDP, but with regard to APC, it could take advantage of the extension. So I believe that INEC acted within its constitutional authority to extend very well. But in my view, it's of no significance, other than perhaps it will enable APC, the party in power, to settle some of the outstanding complexities that is obviously that it may particularly face within such a short time. So my view is that the extension or no extension is not particularly material for this election.
Okay, but do you foresee litigations springing up as a result of this move by INEC? As many believe the principle of equity and good conscience was downplayed to favor the ruling party.
Well, it's not particularly, that's precisely the point I'm making. First and foremost, the main opposition party still had at least 48 hours to extend its time. In other words, to defer the primary for the presidential if it wanted. But I believe PDP is of the view that it was ready to conduct its primary. So I do not see any iniquity or injustice or unequal treatment with regard to PDP, in my view.
Okay. All right. So for you, you don't foresee any litigation coming up?
No, I do not see any litigation at all, because there was no unequal treatment of any of the political parties. The extension is pronounced and it has equal application to all the political parties in Nigeria.
Many Nigerians opine that you and your learned colleagues, with all due respect, talking about lawyers, are part of the root cause of our problems in Nigeria, with the manipulations of our laws and constitutions, divergent interpretations here and there. Now, some lawyers have stated that the ongoing primaries are valid under extant laws and not affected by amendments to the Electoral Act. What's your stance on this?
The amendment, now we're talking of two amendments. There's an amendment that was signed by the president that obviously became law.
Yes.
That was the first bill. The president signed it and it became a binding law. There is a second amendment which has not been signed by the president. Now, the primaries have been conducted under the first amendment of the Electoral Act. And to that extent, all the primaries are valid. Now, this second amendment intended to amend the first amendment, in order to restore the right of appointees, official appointees, to be able to participate in the primaries. The president has not signed this. So to that extent, it's not relevant. Unless the president signs that particular bill, it is not a law. And if the president fails to sign it, well, within a period of time, under the Constitution, the National Assembly can overrule the veto of the president. But all of that hasn't happened. So the prevailing law as at now is the first amendment that was signed by the president that excludes appointees, political appointees mainly, from participating in the elections. And I think it also affects elected politicians too. So to that extent, I mean, we are bound by the law. Again, I mean, I don't think that's a major issue, in the sense that, as I understand the amended law, five elected delegates from each local government of the federation are required to gather together in order to elect a candidate in each political party for contest against the other political party. So these are not issues that I think are problematic in terms of coming up with, a president for the federation.
Okay. So what's the import of his signing or withholding his assent on this particular amendment? Does it affect anything?
Well, the non-signing, right? Well, the non-signing will not affect anything, in my view. The only thing is that it has excluded a certain category of people. But then the law could decide that for the purposes of, electing the candidate in this type of contest, that a certain category of people are empowered to do that. I do not see any problem, to be honest with you. My view, however, is that from the standpoint of the Constitution, I do not think it is appropriate to add to or reduce what is required by the Constitution to stand for election or to participate in electing.
Okay, do you foresee the National Assembly overriding the president's veto on the amendment as it is?
Well, I don't think it, maybe for the future, but I doubt it, because I think the effort was made quickly in order to apply it to the present electoral process. Unfortunately, the electoral process is ongoing already. So the relevance of overriding the president's veto becomes otious now, becomes not particularly material for this particular election. Maybe for future elections, mid-year, mid-term, in other words, may be relevant. But for this particular election, I think we have gone beyond that now.
Now, let's talk about the ongoing primaries. It's been laden with thrills and frills, and of course, allegations of delegates being bought by aspirants. Must our political space be characterized with all of these shenanigans? I would like you to share your thesis on the ongoing primaries and the political process.
Well, as a man who participated in the struggle for democracy, who went to jail at least 3 times against military government, and as a human rights activist and a constitutionalist, I think it is tragic that we are where we are now in this nation. As it is now, the electoral process is only meant for the rich, regardless of the source of their wealth. And this whole disorder, this whole neurosis began from the political parties. If you have to impose such huge money in order to buy mere form to participate in election, instead of determining certain important criteria, for example, good standing, the issue of education, regard within the community, avoidance of any criminality, and so on and so forth. Instead of focusing on those material attributes, most of the political parties focus on money. How can you, for example, ask a man who wants to run for Senate, like I was interested in Senate, to pay 20 million just to buy a form in an uncertain journey? I said to one of my friends, if I was going to the kingdom of God, and I know I will sit next to the good old God, to the Lord, to the God, and I enjoy in perpetuity good life, then I will pay 20 million to buy that nomination form to get to heaven. But to spend 20 million to buy a mere nomination form, not for an uncertain journey, and thereafter you have to spend money for the entire process. I think it is tragic, more tragic, because we are a developing nation that should pay more to value instead of materiality. I think it is a great tragedy for this nation. It just shows the mentality of the leaders of this country. They are not really serious about raising great leaders. They are essentially a representation of value and so on and so forth, not representation of money. Nobody in human evolutionary progression is remembered for his wealth. Not one single person in human evolutionary progression is remembered for his money or his wealth. You are remembered for how you impact on human life. So I'm so disappointed and even embarrassed as a man who went to jail 3 times in the struggle for democracy in this country.
All right, there was and there's still considerable anxiety among leaders of the two leading political parties, the ruling All Progressives Congress APC and the opposition People's Democratic Party PDP. The disagreement over how their presidential aspirants for the 2023 general election should emerge. It's obvious that the People's Democratic Party discarded zoning as Mr. Atiku Abubakar has emerged as a presidential candidate for the main opposition party. What are your thoughts on zoning of the presidential ticket as a constitutional lawyer and stalwart of the APC?
Well, first and foremost, it's important to appreciate that zoning is not a constitutional mandate.
Okay.
Under the Constitution, every Nigerian citizen who is qualified by the prescription of the Constitution is entitled to run for any office, including running for the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But then, cultural security and cultural norm, political cultural norm could demand that zoning in order to ensure peaceful relationship. For example, you have 2 things to struggle for, and you have 2 brothers. The question is, the quicker among the 2 should pick the 2 objects. So they rushed. The quicker one picked the first object. Now again, they run again. Should the one that picked the first object also pick the second object? Of course, the prescription is that the quicker you pick the object. But if the first one, who is quicker, picks the second object, he could say that, look, I already have an object and I'm faster than you, you take the second object. So in some cases, equity and justice requires what I would call modification of the strict requirements of law in order to ensure happiness of a community. I think this is where the issue of zoning comes in. For example, in the Constitution, you talk of national character. What really is national character? National character is about equity, to ensure that you don't have a particular ethnic group dominating the apparatus of government to the detriment of other political parties. Strictly speaking, national character violates the what I would call Nigerianity of citizens, but it is there in order to improve on our relationship. So political parties deciding to zone makes some sense in order to ensure that we equalize justice within the political rivalry in the country. So to that extent, I see nothing wrong in zoning. But in strict legalism, zoning is not required by the Constitution.
Okay. On a lighter note, we have seen quite a lot of drama and intrigues during the season, of primaries. For instance, Mr. Peter Obi, one of the presidential aspirants of the People's Democratic Party, had dumped the party and, in fact, resigned his membership of the PDP, alleging dollarization of the campaigns. Mr. Hayatuddin also withdrew from the race at the very last minute over what he termed obscene monetization of the process. Do you think we're going to see more drama unfold from other political gladiators, especially the ruling All Progressives Congress, as time goes by?
Well, it's difficult to say, but the truth of the matter is that the whole layout in itself is dramatic, isn't it? I think the nation the nation was shocked by the drama of 100 million to buy a form. That's it. The nation was shocked by the drama of the number of people that were contesting to be president, including the incompetent human beings. Some of them are facing criminal charges. Some of them are barely able to speak English. Some of them, all sorts of characters running to become president over us. So we already have drama. So there may be more drama. Many of the politicians are dramatics. You know what are actors. You know what I mean, within the political scene. So we cannot exclude more drama, in the but at the end of it all, the hope, and I believe the hope of the ordinary people in this country is that a more responsive and responsible leadership will be elected for this country that will bring about reform in many, many ways. This nation needs serious reform and regeneration.
Finally, before I let you go, Mr. Tunji Abayomi, do you think Nigerians still have faith in the electoral process and the political system fraught with so much hypocrisy, flippant abuse of processes, and uncommon vote buying as seen at some primaries? Will there be a time in Nigeria's political history when politicians will stop seeing politics as a business venture, but an avenue to truly serve the people?
That time will come, because if today some of the actors, contestants, aspirants are paying 1 million, as I understand, in some of even the legislative elections, they were given up to 1 million per delegate. So how long can that be sustained? It's nothing but pure madness. The question is, how long can you sustain madness of this nation? So I believe a time will come when we will reach the plateau of disorder and find a new solution to the problem of this nation. We can't just continue like this. It's embarrassing. In most other climes, elections are decided by small contributions by the people. I think that at a point, we will obviously have to apply what I would call modern technology, a form of e-voting. For example, if we have e-voting, you don't have to give anybody money. You sit in your house and you cast your vote. If you are, for example, a delegate, that's the other issue. The other issue is that the poverty in the land has made it so terrible for the ordinary citizen to be able to act without the influence of money. I myself, I ran for political offices, and I was surprised how desperate the ordinary people are for the money. In some cases, they will go to the pit of hell in order to get that money. And in my case, I ran and I said, I cannot. How can I give you money when I want to serve you? It can never happen to me, never. If I want to serve you, put my time and my energy, I cannot give you money. At the end of it, what was the consequence? The consequence is that I got only 5 votes out of about 3,000 votes, notwithstanding all my contribution and all my effort. So the people themselves, in some cases, are worse than their leaders. So in dealing with the challenge of political emergence in our country, we have to find strategies that deal with the desire and desperate desire of the people, as well as the desperate desire of their leaders to get to political office.
We can only hope that we get to that point. Legal practitioner, human rights and democratic advocate, Dr. TUNJI ABAYOMI, many thanks for sharing your views with me on the big issue.
Thank you so much, Obia.
Yes, thank you so much. I will now go on a quick break for the news update. Do join us again.